All right, let's dive right into this explainer. We're looking at a completely fascinating window of world history today, the era between roughly 1775 and 1850. When we look back at this specific slice of time, we're really looking at an age driven by two completely different but absolutely massive forces. We often call this the Age of Revolutions, but as we're going to see, the word revolution meant two very distinct things depending on where exactly you were standing. So we're going to unpack these twin engines of modernity, figure out exactly how they operated, and see how they built the very foundation of the world we're all living in right now. To really wrap your head around the sheer scale of what was happening, I want you to picture a split-screen reality. On one side of the screen, you literally have crowds storming the Bastille in Paris. They're out in the streets demanding liberty, equality, and actual political representation. Kings are being actively challenged, and this revolutionary fervor is just spreading like wildfire across the Atlantic world. But, okay, at almost the exact same moment on the other side of the screen, factory whistles are blowing way before sunrise. Men, women, and children are pouring into these massive textile mills. The sky is filling with coal smoke, railroads are suddenly connecting distant regions at speeds nobody even thought possible, and entire societies are fundamentally reorganizing themselves around machines and industrial capitalism.
And seeing that split screen brings us right to the absolute core of the historical debate we're tackling today. Which of these two distinct engines actually changed the world more? Was it the political revolutions that overthrew governments, or was it the economic revolutions that changed how everyday goods were made? Now, a quick heads up, one of the biggest mistakes we can make here is assuming there's a simple black and white right answer. Historians intensely debate this specifically because both types of revolutions completely transformed the modern world. They just did it in vastly different ways and on totally different scales.
Let's move into Section 1, the political power shift, changing who holds power.
Let's kick things off with that political shift. During this era, ordinary, everyday people started standing up and asking a genuinely dangerous question, a question that threatened the entire global order at the time. They asked, who should actually hold power? This was the spark that ignited the American, French, Haitian, and Latin American revolutions. These political upheavals unleashed incredibly powerful new concepts onto the world stage. We're talking liberty, equality, nationalism, citizenship, and representation. This was a massive, fundamental shift in human thought. It moved societies away from this deeply entrenched belief that power comes from kings or monarchs or inherited privilege to the incredibly radical idea that political power inherently belongs to the people.
Here is the absolute crucial takeaway, though. Even when these political revolutions ultimately failed, or maybe they got a lot more conservative over time, or even when they hypocritically excluded large groups of people from their new societies, the genie was out of the bottle. These potent ideas just kept spreading across the Atlantic world, jumping from nation to nation. Think about it. Once a population begins to imagine a world where they actually hold the power, you simply cannot unthink that thought. It changes the political landscape forever.
Which brings us to Section 2, transforming everyday life, the industrial disruption. Because, look, while the political revolutions were totally rewriting who got to sit in the fancy government offices, the economic revolution, industrialization, was completely upending how human beings existed every single day. For thousands of years of human history, most people lived in rural agricultural societies. Families largely worked together, production happened locally, and the pace of life was incredibly slow. It was dictated entirely by the seasons and the harvests. While the Industrial Disruption shattered that reality. Just boom! Suddenly, we see massive migrations into urban cities, traditional family labor gets completely replaced by factory wage labor, we see this rapid technological acceleration, and entire economies being reorganized strictly around capitalism. It was, quite literally, a totally new way of organizing human existence.
What's really wild to think about is that, unlike a political revolution, which might start and finish over the course of a few incredibly violent and chaotic years, industrialization was a steady, grinding, generational transformation. Ironically, this so-called revolution actually started out at a rather slow pace before completely steamrolling the globe. It created entirely new social classes from scratch, specifically the industrial middle class and the urban working class. It completely upended traditional gender roles because factory work fundamentally changed family dynamics. And it just continually accelerated communication and transportation, making the world feel smaller and faster with every passing decade.
Let's look at Section 3, progress, price, and interconnection, the messy middle.
Now, the absolute biggest mistake we could make as students of history is treating these two massive forces, the political and the economic, like they were operating in entirely different universes. They weren't. It was a total chain reaction.
everything is deeply interconnected. Industrial capitalism came in and reorganized society, right? But that new system created a massive urban working class, which eventually led to labor movements, socialism, and class consciousness. And then those labor movements started demanding the exact same political reforms, equality, and rights that the political revolutions were fighting for in the first place. Finally, as people sought a sense of identity in this incredibly rapidly changing world, nationalism emerged, connecting people to larger political identities. This unified some societies, but it completely destabilized massive older empires like the Ottomans and the Habsburgs. So the economic engine directly fueled the political engine.
And you know, when analyzing all this, historians don't just look at it and ask if change happened. They ask, okay, but who won and who paid the price? We really have to avoid these overly simple narratives about pure, unadulterated progress. Yes, absolutely, there was massive economic growth, new consumer goods, amazing technological innovation, and expanded concepts of freedom, but the costs were incredibly severe. Progress came with crippling urban poverty, terrible pollution, and truly brutal working conditions. Plus, there's a really bitter historical irony here. The glorious promises of these political revolutions deliberately excluded millions of people. Women, enslaved people, indigenous populations, and many common workers were left out entirely. The cost of this modern world was extraordinarily high for so many.
All right, final section. Section 4, Making the Modern World, the Echoes of 1775 to 1850.
All of this deeply interconnected history, the factories, the political ideas, the new technologies like railroads and steamships and modern weapons, it directly sets the stage for why Western Europe became so globally dominant in the 19th century. This explosive combination fundamentally reshaped global trade, imperialism, and the relationships between societies across the entire planet. And honestly, here's exactly why understanding this explainer actually matters to you today. Inequality, labor rights, nationalism, representation, the unchecked power of capitalism and technology, globalization, the very role of our government. Does that list look familiar? It really should. Because the intense, heated debates we are having in our societies right this second trace directly back to this specific era. The period between 1775 and 1850 is the exact moment where the modern world as we experience today started becoming recognizable.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with the ultimate question that historians are still wrestling with today. Does changing political systems actually matter more than changing how people live and work every single day? Which of these twin engines truly transform the world more? The next time you vote in an election, or the next time you clock in for a shift at work? Think about that, because the echoes of both of those revolutions are still actively shaping your life right now. Keep wrestling with that idea, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.